And let's get right back into it. Still making some changes and improvements to Kess's deck list, but I'm really actually very happy with where it is right now. So far I've lost exactly one game to Timna Kraum, and the deck's been performing pretty well even against pretty competitive decks. So here we have Kess vs. Kess, the mirror match. Keeping a hand that's nice and interactive with Inquisition, Counter Magic, and Burn. I see Hero's Downfall and Opt as well as a bunch of plans, which are certainly going to take the compulsive research there. Opponent goes ahead and opts, as one would expect. Now, with the Hero's Downfall in their hand, I'm not planning on playing Kess for a good long while, and I'm hoping to use my miscalculation on their Kess. But since this is a fellow Kess player, surely they know that counter magic is going to be a concern. So here they actually are going to play out their Boseiju rather than playing Kess, which I think is kind of interesting. I definitely agree with not just running it into obvious counter magic, so I see where they're coming from there. I'm going to hold up Grim Lavamancer this turn because there's a chance I can Lightning Bolt and Lavamancer Kess if they counter my counter magic. However, instead they do nothing. So I'm just going to Factor Fiction, not really expecting it to resolve, but it actually does here, which is kind of interesting. I'm going to take the pile with 2 lands, since I'm just looking for more cards rather than better cards in this circumstance, and lay down Pyromancer while holding up Miscalculation, as well as Victim of the Night. Obviously I can't counter Kess anymore thanks to Cavern of Souls, but I can Victim of the Night Kess, and they will counter back with an uncounterable negate. That's actually perfectly fine by me. It prevents them from using Kess on their turn, and I can just kill it off with Chain Lightning plus Grim Lavamancer, which I do. Young Pyromancer presenting quite a clock here, as it generally does in these matchups. And they're going to respond by Subterranean Tremorsing for 1, clearing out the whole board for a nice 2 mana. Pretty nice Pyroclasm. I'm considering running it in this deck just to deal with decks like Breya that may have a lot of artifacts. Regardless, we're kind of just in a standoff here where we're both waiting for opportunity to play Kess. They think they have it, and they're actually holding up 2 mana here. But I'm going to just play out my Kess and try to kill theirs with my Victim of the Night. However, they have Memory Lapse here, uncounterable, so I can't obviously Arcane that back. But I can make the same play next turn if they don't present any other threats. Here they're going to Painful Truths for 3, not casting it with Boseiju because they want that extra card, so I'll try to Arcane Denial. They'll negate from the graveyard, which I sort of expected. This prevents them from recurring value from the graveyard, like Compulsive Research, which honestly might have been my play. Regardless, the Painful Truth is going to resolve, which I'm kind of happy with. I didn't really want them to just draw 2 cards from Arcane Denial anyway. They're going to probe and see the Herb, which I've actually been holding specifically so that they have to keep paying life off Boseiju if they want to keep getting that uncounterable effect. And here's where the plan becomes pretty obvious. I'm actually going for the burn kill. So you can see they were at 8 life here, and rather than trying to kill Kess, I'm just going to burn them in the hopes that this will combine with their lands and the Chain Lightning in my graveyard, present a clock that they really can't deal with. They're going to Condescend for 3 here, but in order to do that, they had to tap Boseiju, so they're only taking 2 damage instead of 1. I'm going to play out Baleful Strix and a land, and try to tax their removal such that I can eventually land Kess, burn them, and completely cut them off playing any of these painful mana sources. Damage comes through. They opt, again trying to avoid paying life. And here I'm just going to try to replay Kess. And I'm actually just going to Victim of the Night their Kess here. Burning them for 3 doesn't seem fantastic. It's going to take them to 3, and they're going to be able to kill Kess next turn with Terminate. So that's something that I'm not too willing to have happen. They're going to plus Liliana, and I'll obviously discard Herb since I wasn't planning on playing it regardless. And they have a Mixilus to kill Kess, which is kind of a mixed blessing. On the one hand, Kess dies here. On the other hand, it actually incentivizes them to pay more life, which is going to put them in increased danger of getting burned out. I'm going to Bribery, just getting a Baleful Strix since their deck is very creature-light, and counter the Flame Slash since any amount of clock is pretty powerful when they're only on 6 life, and that's going to induce them to use Liliana and kill Baleful Strix off with that. So I'm happy with that 2 for 1. They're going to go to 5 life with Obnixilis, and here I'm going to resume the waiting game. I can't afford them countering Kess multiple times here, so I can just sit back and try to incentivize them to use their Boseiju to force something through, and I don't think they're going to do it. So now I'm just holding up to the point where I can potentially cast Kess and have counter magic open. And here they make what I think is kind of a mistake. They go down to 3 life to crack Flooded Strand and play Kess. And this play makes sense in retrospect. What happens here is they've actually drawn Cryptic Command. So their belief is that they can now land Kess, counter whatever play I have, and completely stabilize and take over the game. Unfortunately for them, I draw Duress here, which lets me rip the Cryptic Command out of their hand and cast my Kess and burn them for the 3 damage that I need to end the game. They're going to counter the Duress, since obviously there's no reason not to, and potentially hope to draw into Pact Negation or something, but unfortunately they don't get it, and I get to Chain Lightning them for game. Now this is, I consider, a very lucky win on my part. If I hadn't drawn Duress, this game would have gone a lot longer and my chances would have gone down significantly, but I think that you can see that the fact that I played to a very specific win condition, similar to the last game against Queen Marchesa, really did this deck a great service in its ability to actually win the game, rather than trying to play to not lose. In this case, I was playing to win, and it paid off. Alright, next game, we've got Breya versus Kess, another very, very powerful control deck. These are a huge portion of the metagame, so I expect to see them a fair amount. They're going to play Signets, which is pretty standard for Breya. They'll often lead off in a Signet on turn 2. I'm just going to try to hymn them to hopefully keep them from playing Breya. Instead, I get Kolaghan's Command, Smuggler's Copter. Very glad to get both those cards out of their hand, and they're just going to go ahead and cast Breya. Since it's such fantastic field control, they don't really need to care about what I resolve afterwards. The Path of Ancestry thing is kind of cool. I noticed that the Kess player had that as well. I'm vaguely considering it for this deck, but overall I think the tapped land is just not good enough. Regardless, I can play Talisman and Flame Slash here, clearing off their Breya. If I can make Breya too expensive, there will get to be a point where they just can't play it, or if I can keep down the artifact creatures, they'll have to get rid of their mana to actually use it to its full advantage. But anyway, I'm just going to play Kess and kill a creature here while they don't have Breya online, hoping that they'll just tap out for Breya this turn. But that's unfortunately not going to be the case, as they're going to Phyrexian Metamorph my Kess and Kolaghan's Command to take out one of my mana sources and a card in my hand. Not that bad, and I can just go ahead and kill Kess here, as well as hymning 2 more cards out of their hand, taking them down to no cards. But of course, since this is Breya, they can just recast Breya, which I'm fully aware of. I know that I can remove it next turn. Instead of doing that, however, they cast the Antiquities War, and this is going to be better than a Phyrexian Arena for them, since they're going to be looking at the top 5 cards every time instead of just the top card, and eventually this is going to present a very real clock as they turn all of their Signets and Thopters into 5/5s. Thankfully, that's a couple turns off, so I can sort of take my time here, go ahead and draw 2 cards with Shadow of Doubt and keep up Fatal Push, since I fully expect them to cast Breya this turn to increase their clock significantly. Rather than doing that, they're actually going to Venser and blink the Antiquities War and get 2 more turns of getting card advantage rather than skipping straight to the 5/5 mode. Pretty cool play, but of course I can just kill Venser outright, Kess plus Lightning Bolt, and Duress to take the Cranial Plating out of their hand. So we can see this is kind of less of a control deck than it is a artifact deck, I guess. It's not really aggro, it's not really tempo, and they're not really playing to a really strong theme necessarily, but they are playing a ton of artifacts and payoff for artifacts, so that's kind of an interesting way of doing things that you don't really often see done well in this format. Regardless, I'm going to keep picking off their artifacts to make sure that the Antiquities War doesn't outright kill me next turn. Here they could take me to 7 if they want, but it'll keep them from doing anything else. Instead of doing that, they're just going to recast Breya, which I'm perfectly fine with, and just go ahead and hit me in the air for 5. Again, super fine with me. I can go ahead and re-kill Breya, as I continue to do. Kess, so fantastic being able to double up on every removal spell in the deck, take them to 15 life and 12 commander damage, and here they do a really interesting thing. This kind of reinforces what appears to be their actual plan here, which is not really to win with Breya so much as win with the Thopters. The fact that Breya shows up and is super flexible removal, super flexible burn, as well as spitting out these flying attackers is really fantastic with stuff like Bloodforged Battle Axe, which is going to continue making each one of these Thopters a massive threat, as well as Cranial Plating and the Antiquities War. So I'm actually pretty impressed with my opponent's deck here. Remand obviously won't hold off Bloodforged Battle Axe in this case, but it will potentially draw me to counter magic. Instead, I get Dark Petition, which is going to let me clear the board using something like a Toxic Deluge in this case. So regardless of how many Bloodforged Battle Axes they get, if they don't have any creatures to use them, that's not even a problem for me. So here I'm going to go ahead and do exactly what I just said. Dark Petition for Deluge, as well as casting another Duress from my graveyard, pulling a Coalition Relic out of their hand. Not too impactful, but always nice to get that additional value. And here they're going to pull off a massive Word of Invention for 6 here. And I was kind of expecting something like... the big sun thing from Ixalan, draws you an extra card every turn and makes your creatures bigger, which would make sense in a deck that's trying to beat down with Thopters. But instead they get Wormcoil Engine and equip it, so that's an 8/6. And initially I'm thinking, I don't really care about this much. I can maybe get Fire and Ice to keep it tapped down while I just keep attacking with Kess and keep getting value with Snapcaster Mage. But I realize I have actually a much better play here, which is going to seal up the game, and that's flashing back Dark Petition for, in this case, it's actually going to be Dak Faden and just outright steal the Wormcoil Engine. So that will actually be the game there. So once more, pretty interesting game. You can see how powerful Kess is when she gets rolling. My concern is just that against decks with sufficient removal, she won't get rolling. So whereas in previous games, my win condition was very clear and focused, in this game it was just to keep holding on with Kess and keep taxing their resources until I could just maintain an insurmountable advantage, which is kind of nice to have that flexibility in Commander. So that's the 2 games I had to show in this video. I hope you enjoyed and have a good night.